Okay, we previously wrote a PHP function and we wrote tests for it. And we put the function and the tests in the same file. We're going to take a short video to talk about separating those into separate files. In fact, there's a third file that I'm going to talk about. And generally, we might well have three files. A file with our PHP code, a separate file with the test cases, and a separate file that goes and prints out a web page but calls some of those functions in that we originally wrote. Okay, so first I'm going to put them all in one file and then we're going to pull them out into pieces. So looking at the previous file, I've renamed it to blend-all-in-one.php, but we saw a sample function that returned a linguistic blend of two words. Okay. And we had the function that ended up being a whopping 3 lines long. We had test cases that were, oh my gosh, a whole bunch of lines long, but really weren't that bad coming up with those, and we followed our knee-jerk rules for what sort of strings to try on test cases, and it actually helped us. It got through some difficulties with odd-length strings and so on. Okay, so and you're like, great, Barland, we have this function blend, let's go ahead and make a web page that can use it. I mean, what's the purpose of having a function if you can't use it? And what's the purpose of PHP if you're not going to write web pages with it, because it's such an awful language, I'm not going to use it anywhere else. Okay, so, except for my PHP server, that's the one language they'll let me use easily without having to have root access to the server. Okay. So, I might want to go and make a web page that just sort of says something like, I heard no man is an... I'm going to echo this. I heard no man is an... And then I'm going to go and call blend of Ian and Barland. Okay. And that's just going to go and print out as something... whatever, echo, we are taking a class blend of iTech and 325. Notice I'm going to pass in the string 325. Okay, fair enough, and maybe I want to put these inside a paragraph. Gosh, echo, this is a web page, yeah, I'm going to go and echo a p tag, then echo this, then echo this, then echo the close p tag. Gosh, remember this is what I'm going to send to a browser at the end of the day. We'll go ahead, well, let me just go ahead and try this. Of course, this is not, what I'm printing here is not a web page, these 4 lines. I guess I need a little bit more, right? Echo open, an HTML open tag. And then echo, I guess, a body tag, which probably I want to have it indented. And actually before the body I have a head tag, which will be closed. Close that body tag before I forget. Okay, close the HTML tag before I forget. I'm going to go ahead and I want to print out again some HTML, and if we're going to print it out, it might as well be nicely indented HTML. Okay, great. What goes inside a head tag again in a web page? Look up web 1. Title is a good thing to have. A page produced by calling a PHP function. That's a really long title. Okay. Gosh, where else should I put the title? Where does this title show up on a page? Kind of a trick question. Depends on the browser. Usually we look up in the tab, in the browser tab, there's a title of the file, and that's where that gets used. It doesn't show up on the page itself anywhere. I wanted probably to go ahead and put this. So inside my body tag, I'll go ahead and make at the top of my body tag, I'll make an H2 tag, level 2 headline, saying the same thing. In fact, it's kind of nice if my H2 thing that is inside the page and the title match up exactly word for word. Gosh, I mean, I did that because I did copy paste, but of course this is now prone. I have the same thing twice. I'm I'm liable to come along and say, instead of produced, I want to say created. And I shorten it down a little bit. Yeah, I like that. Okay, cool. Ooh, now I have, it's a pretty minor bug, but I don't have a single point of control. I now have sort of, what is the title of the page? Well, what's on the title tag doesn't match up with the H2 tag. Gosh, let's go ahead and echo, or sorry, not echo, set the title to be head page. I should probably upcase the word function. Okay, and now I can go ahead and do some string appends, the title, and I can do the same thing down here. Okay, now things look better, and I can just change this the title in one place, and it will automatically show up in two different places in what I'm printing out. Okay, this sounds, I kind of like what's here, HTML tag, okay. I guess if I wanted to add a doc type HTML5 or something like that, I could add that as well. I'm going to not worry about that. Let me just go and run this program, PHP blend all-in-one PHP, and run it and see what gets printed out. Ooh, parse error. Again, the most important thing to look at, which file, well, there's only one file going on right now. Line 51, expecting a comma or a semicolon. Make sure you have an editor where you can go to the indicated line easily, and it turns out the missing semicolon is not on this line, it is on the previous line. And I guess that one, and that one. This was not an intentional mistake. I really did leave that off. Okay. Now I can run my program at, ooh, line 60. So, you see this, and that was the last one I left off. Okay, what gets printed out? Oh, first of all, my test cases get printed out. I don't want that. And then I get this HTML head title, but it's all in one line. Why is it all in one line? I heard no man is an island, and we are taking the class IT25. Awesome. But yeah, I don't want those. I mean, that's valid HTML, what's there. Every open tag is closed. Everything is good like that. But if I do a view source, you know, it kind of looks weird. I probably want to print new line characters, and I didn't do that. So I can go ahead and here. And again, having a text editor that lets you repeat the previous command easily is kind of nice. Which is why people love Vim or Emacs with Vim key bindings. Okay, so now I can go ahead and run this program, and after all my test cases print, I get what I really want to be a web page. If I run this program and take just the second part and send it off to a browser, that's maybe what I'm looking. And I was able to create that by, and I used some language features. I managed to call blend. I had a variable used in two different places. Okay, great. But my problem is if I just have it like this, and somebody requests this page over the web server will run this entire file, print all the test cases out, which I don't want to have happen. And really, you know, I think about it, these things are in the wrong place. I want these in separate files. I want my test cases in one file and my code in a different file. If I'm running Java, you tend to have one class with your method declarations and another class with all the unit tests for it. And then maybe some other class entirely that actually does the work calling the functions you wrote over there, calling them as helpers. Blend is one of the helpers that you wrote. Okay, so in Java, what we're going to use a PHP directive called require once, require_once. And it's a little bit similar to pound include in C. If you've done that, it's sort of like a little bit like import in Java. That's a lie, but you can think of it as like what import does in Java. Okay, let me show an example and then mention exactly what it does. So I'm going to make two files. I'm going to have a file where I have my source code and another file where I have my test cases and a third file where I have this little page that I'm going to make. So I'm going to go, I'm going to copy blend all in one, and I'm going to make one file called utilities that just has, it's going to have utility functions like blend, And actually, over the course of the semester, we're going to be adding more and more functions to our file utilities.php, so utils.php. And I'm going to have another file that has my test cases, utils. What should I call the file that tests all the functions that are in utils? I'll say don't waste time thinking about it. I'm going to call it utilstest.php. Anytime I have a file with PHP code, I'm going to have a file with test cases for it, and it's going to be the same name -test.php. So, and I'm not going to try to think about coming up with fancier names. I'm going to follow that protocol. People will understand what's going on. Okay. And finally, I'm going to make a copy of this into, some PHP that just prints out some sort of silly little web page, sillypage.php. Okay. Let me edit these files. Right now I have 3 different things in each of those files. Let me rip out the appropriate parts from each file. So utils.php, leave it in here, define the function blend, and be done with it. Okay, that's the entire function blend.php, just the source code. Okay. Via utils test.php is going to be just the test cases. Okay. And finally, I'll come back to this, but the sillypage.php is going to be just the part that prints out the HTML. Okay, I've broken my 3 different tasks on 3 different files, all for a good reason. Okay, now, here's the problem though. Let's go ahead and PHP utils test.php, and let's do this, and I get an error. Call the undefined function blend, okay, on line 3 of my utils test. Yeah, well, that makes sense. I just start running PHP, and it does echo, it understands echo, and then it sees, hey, you're calling a function blend, and blend's not a built-in function. So yeah, PHP gives an error. Makes sense. Oh, when I knew that, here's what I want to do. Require _once. This is a function I call. I pass it a string. That string is a file name, the file to include. So require the function utils.php. And what this does really, as PHP is running this file, it starts at the very top of a file and goes line by line. When it hits, if it ever calls the function require once, it says, hey, go find that other file with that indicated file name and snarf it in here and pretend it was occurring right in here. Okay, pull in all its contents, splice them in right here for logical purpose. Okay, so now I can go ahead and say run my utils test, and I get all those test cases running just like before, just as well as before. Okay, and similarly with my silly page, yeah, this went ahead and it is PHP code, but it include calls to blend, so require once utils.php. One thing I would like to emphasize is that this file here is a PHP program that's meant to create a web page. I do not consider this a test function. I mean, I know that I'm calling the function, and I can run this and look at it by hand and sort of see, yeah, I think I sort of did the right thing. But it is not my test cases. Test cases are a different thing. They'll be automatically checked at the end of the day, and they include a desired output, not just calling the function. So I would not call this a unit test at all. Actually, from one of the previous lectures, I mentioned, gosh, PHP does not have your back. There are things that you can do and stupid typos that will run no problem. How can we protect ourselves a little bit of defensive programming, at least the defensive programming that they later added to PHP? Hey, call the function error reporting and say, hey, report all errors. Okay. So I'm going to stick this up at the top of my program. I should probably do that on all my files, but I'm happy to do it here. Okay. Great. Now I can go ahead and run sillypage.php, and it runs, and it prints out just the stuff I want to send to a browser. Okay. Just exactly these characters here. Okay. So I look now and I actually have 3 files, utils, that contain my code. Utils test. Every function that was in utils had its unit tests over in utils test, obviously enough. And then other files that just use my helper functions that are off in utils. So that's fine. You might be wondering, hey, if there's require underscore once, what does that mean? What does that do? And the quick answer is it snarfs in the file you're requiring, but you can do a web search for PHP require underscore once, and you might forget the name, and you just, something about including a file or requiring a file, PHP, and that'll probably get you to the right thing. Require once, and sure enough, the require once statement, well, almost a recursive definition, well, a definition that refers me to another function. Require once is identical to require, except that PHP will check if the file's already been included, and if not, and if so, it won't include it again. Okay. So what is require? So there's a require and a require once. See, require is identical to include, except that on failure it produces an actual important error. So yeah, it turns out this function include. Don't use it. This is, again, PHP not having your back. If you mistype that file name, we want to get an error message. Yeah, so use require. So, okay. You can go ahead and require, and it pulls in the function. Require versus require once. What's the difference? Well, looking back at this code here, this utils.php just defined a function. Okay. If I've required that file, I don't need to require it again later. It's not going to do me anything. Now, why would I ever require the same file more than once? Well, I might have another function called standard helpers, and that one might include utils. And then I might have a function called web-specific helpers, and I might include that from my file. But web-specific helpers, it might go ahead and for its internal use might want to include all the files back in utils. So indirectly, I might call files, I myself might try to require 2 different files, and each of those might itself need to require or import or whatever an underlying file like utils.php, and I don't want to do that more than once. There's no point in reading the file and bringing it in a second time. The definitions are all already there. So really I want to use require once for almost everything we do in this class. Which begs the question, well, why would ever I want require instead of require once? Well, you won't really do this, but if you ever want to snarf in some other file that's probably not just defining a function, but actually doing something, having a side effect, like maybe printing something, like printing a sidebar or printing a navigation bar, and you might have a file where you're printing a web page, and you might want to do a require navigation bar.php and snarf it in, and then later on in your page you might want to go ahead and require that file again and have it in multiple places. So if you have a side effect, you might really want to require the file more than once. If you are just defining functions and not printing or doing output or writing to a file, then probably just require once is what you want. And again, that's what we'll pretty much be using, all we'll use for this class is require once. Thanks.